So, you're starting out on your financial journey, and there's one question that probably feels, well, a little overwhelming. How do you actually start investing? Well, today, we're going to break down a fantastic, no jargon guide from multijon.in that shows you how to build your very first portfolio with an amount that's probably a lot smaller than you think.
Does that sound familiar? I bet it does. You know, that's probably the biggest, most damaging myth that holds so many young Indians back from building wealth. We tell ourselves, oh, I'll start investing someday, right? But while we're waiting for that someday, we are missing out on the single most powerful force in all of finance: compounding.
So, let's just bust that myth right here, right now. The truth is, thanks to incredible tools like the Systematic Investment Plan, you've probably heard it called an SIP, you don't need lakhs to get in the game. You can build a serious diversified portfolio with just $5,000 a month. So let's dive in and see exactly how it's done. All right, here's the game plan for today. First, we're going to properly bust that big myth. Then we'll run through a super important pre-investment checklist. After that, we'll explain equity versus debt in a way that actually makes sense. Then we get to the fun part, the 5,000 rupees portfolio recipe. We'll cover 3 golden rules for success, and finally show you why your journey really does start now. All right, Section 2, your pre-investment checklist. Before you put even a single rupee to work, you have to build a solid foundation. I mean, jumping in without one is kind of like taking off on a long flight without doing a pre-flight check. And trust me, that's a risk you just don't want to take. So the big question is, where do you actually begin? You know, getting these next few steps right, that's what makes the difference between a calm, successful investor and, well, someone who totally panics at the first sign of trouble. Okay, there are 3 things you've absolutely got to do. First, define your why. What are you doing this for? Are you investing for retirement in, say, 20 years? Or maybe a down payment on a house in 5? Your timeline changes everything. Second, know your risk tolerance and be honest with yourself. How would you really feel if you saw your portfolio drop by 30%? Answering that now helps you sleep at night later. And third, the most important rule of them all is to build that emergency fund. Seriously, this part is non-negotiable. We're talking 3 to 6 months of your essential living expenses, rent, food, the basics, kept in a safe account you can get to easily. This is your financial safety net. It's what stops you from being forced to sell your investments at the absolute worst time just to cover an unexpected bill. Okay, moving on to Section 3, equity versus debt explained simply. So now that our foundation is solid, let's look at the 2 main building blocks of any portfolio. Understanding how these 2 work together, that's the real key to a balanced, smart strategy. I love this analogy. Think of your portfolio just like a car. Equity, that's your accelerator. It's what gives you speed and real long-term growth by letting you own a tiny piece of a company. Yeah, the ride can be a bit bumpy, but it's how you actually move forward and beat inflation. Debt, on the other hand, that's your brakes. It gives you stability and safety, smoothing out the ride when things get rocky. The thing is, you absolutely need both to get where you're going safely. All right, this is the exciting part. Section 4, the 5,000 rupee portfolio recipe. So how do we actually put all this together? Let's get practical and look at a simple but really effective recipe for a young investor with a long-term goal, using that 5,000 rupees a month. So the approach here is super simple and, really importantly, diversified. We're going to split our monthly investment into 3 different buckets: a solid foundation for stability, a growth engine to really accelerate our wealth, and a stabilizer to act as a cushion. Okay, let's look at the numbers. First up, 2,500 rupees, that's 50%, goes into a Nifty 50 index fund. Think of this as your foundation. It gives you a piece of India's top 50 companies, simple and solid. Next, 1,500 rupees, or 30%, goes into a FlexiCap fund. This is your growth engine. Here, a fund manager is actively looking for opportunities across all sorts of companies, big and small. And finally, that last 1,000 rupees, our stabilizer, goes into a secure debt instrument like a PPF to give us that all-important cushion. Okay, on to Section 5, 3 golden rules for success. You know, having a great recipe is one thing, but it's your mindset that's really going to decide if you succeed or not in the long run. So let's cover the 3 golden rules of investing. Rule number 1, and this is huge: automate and be consistent. Set up your monthly SIP and just let it run. Let it be like clockwork every single month, no matter what the news is saying about the market. Trust me, consistency is going to build you far more wealth than trying to be a genius ever will. Okay, rule number 2, be patient. Look, you are not going to get rich overnight. It just doesn't work that way. This is a journey that we measure in decades, not in days.
And the single biggest mistake you can make is to panic and stop your investments when the market is down. You have to stay the course. And rule number 3, and this might be the biggest mindset shift you can make. Learn to embrace market dips. For someone like you, a long-term SIP investor, a downturn isn't a crisis. It's a sale. It's a discount. It means your regular monthly investment is now buying more units for the same price. That can seriously accelerate your wealth when the market eventually turns around. And that brings us to section 6, your journey starts now. We've covered the why, the what, and the how. Really, the only thing left to do is the single most important step of all, just starting. The investor who starts today is always going to be ahead of the one who's still waiting for someday.
And look, if you take away just one thing from all this, please let it be this. Your most powerful asset isn't how much money you start with. It's how much time you give that money to grow. That's the real magic ingredient that's going to do all the heavy lifting for you on your journey to financial freedom. So if this explainer helps you out, do us a favor and hit that like button. And if you want to keep learning with more of these super clear, no jargon guides, head on over to multigyan.in. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the Multigyan YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us.